Well, without further ado, first and foremost, I want to officially welcome one of our champion mentors, our newest champion mentor, actually, Vincent Zhou. Vincent, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey Dayton, thanks so much for having me. So great to be here with you all. And that was a cool little highlight reel there, making me look good in front of everyone.
You make the very difficult things look incredibly easy. So we're excited to learn from you, hear from you today, and just again, here's as Kirk said, your insights, your knowledge, and just learn about your path and your journey. So, with that said, Vincent, anything you want to share about your background before we get started? I know we've got some questions for you. We also want to open it up to the chat. If there are questions that you want to place within the Q&A to anybody that's out there, please put them in the Q&A or the chat. We will keep an eye on that and we'll answer those questions along the way. But Vincent, anything you'd like to share, 60-second snippet about your background, anything before we get started?
Yeah, sure. Well, as my bio said, I'm a Team USA figure skater. Been to the Olympics a few times, but it was quite a journey to get there. So I started out in California in the Bay Area, but since then I've sort of moved all over the country, even all over the world to train. And I think ICL is so important and relevant to me because I was in each and every one of your shoes once. Actually, not too long ago. I'm 23 now, but just a few years ago, I was still in high school, and also went to an online school. I was having to balance my training and my academics at the same time, and my family heavily prioritized academics. So, if I didn't get good grades in school, I wasn't allowed to skate. So, as it relates to your journey through both your academic and your sports journeys, I'm really excited to share some of the stuff that I've been through and that I've learned along the way. So thank you again for having me, Dayton and Kirk. And yeah, let's get into it.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much. And you kind of teed it up, Vincent, to get us started. And we're gonna talk about your journey, and that really starts with your passion. Your passion ultimately became figure skating. And when you and I connected previously a couple of times, you talked about your journey and what it was like as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, and starting to make that journey and that path. Talk to us a little bit about that. As far as your passion goes, what inspired you to become a figure skater? What did your journey look like?
Yeah, well, I was a really competitive kid. So, whether it was with my sister, with other kids at school, whoever, I always felt the need to sort of prove myself and be the best. And so, as a kid, I did a lot of sports. I had lots of energy, and I would be bouncing off the walls at home. So my parents were like, we need to get this kid outside. So they put me into a bunch of different things: soccer, swimming, tennis, basketball. I'm 5'8", so that's not really not really going to work out there.
Yes,
Um,
Steve
yeah,
Nash lost 6 feet. You never know.
yeah. So lots of sports, and figure skating was one of them. But the reason figure skating stood out to me was because there was a very tangible learning curve, and each like achieving each rung along that ladder felt extremely rewarding. And yet you still knew that there was so much more to come. And so that sort of kept me hungry, that kept me motivated. And also from the start, figure skating is a sport that requires a lot of time dedication. It's kind of like another sport, for example, where you have to get up early every day is swimming, um, or gymnastics. You got to practice at 5 a.m. before school. And so sinking a lot of time into it at the start sort of cemented it more solidly into my mind, and it was integrated into my lifestyle from a very young age, from very early on. I started at 5.5, and by 7, I was getting up at 4 a.m. To skate. So that's really how I got into it. And once I have something to sort of channel my energy into, it's really hard to stop me. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So you started to talk about it a little bit. You mentioned 5 years old, and you talked about what it took training wise, waking up at 5 in the morning, obviously training late into the night sometimes. You're getting into the process now. Talk to us about the process. What did that look like? Who was involved? Mentors, coaches, trainers, parents. What did that road look like? Because I know you've shared with me in the past, it wasn't an easy road. It was not just this, as Kirk likes to say, perfect hockey stick where you're going straight up to the top. Talk to us about the process and what it took to get there.
Oh boy. Yeah, absolutely true. That's one of the biggest points I wanted to touch on uh is that the process of moving from, a young upstart to through, your adolescent years, your teenage years, and learning both academically and in your sport at the same time. And then eventually, the goal, the dream is to become great, right? To make Team USA, to make the Olympics, whatever. Um, and it's absolutely true that's not linear. Um, it's like a sine wave, and with the right team around you, with the right mindset, with the right resources, you can sort of angle that sine wave upwards so that even though you're always, you'll always have the ups and the downs, you'll have obstacles, you'll sometimes be defeated, you'll sometimes, mess up. But overall, that trajectory, you want to sort of turn it upwards on average. So, the process for me really involved finding the right environment and the right people to surround myself with. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in the Bay Area, but when I was just 9 years old, my mom and I left home to train in Southern California because we quickly realized that the Bay Area didn't have the right coaches for me. The ecosystem was only going to hold me back here. I needed a more sort of intense accelerator, if you will. And so we sort of asked around, we looked for resources, and we were pointed to a coach in Southern California. We were also pointed to an online academy, kind of just like ICL, and and sort of the rest is history. But over the years, I've changed environments a lot of times, and each time I've had to sort of think about the people that I want to surround myself with. Like, who is going to? It's not even about finding necessarily the best objective coach or the best objective, people to be in your team. It's not who has the most, the most golden resume. It's
Mm.
who connects with you the best. Who can you trust when it actually comes down to it? And are they there to help you move along the process? Are they there to help you push the sled forward? Or are they going to be pushing in the opposite direction when the pressure gets intense? Um, and then, in terms of the actual, physical process of learning, I think that's a bit of a different thing. And I have quite a bit to say on that. We can, sort of get into
I,
that later.
I'd love to get into that. I want to go back for a second because, you know, it's so it's so easy to have a passion, right? And it sounds like you played everything. You were probably, we've seen the way that you can move, probably good at a lot faster. Do you know when that tipping point was for you when you mentally, how did you take that passion for skating and we're like, okay, this is going to be a purpose? Because people mix those words a lot, passion and purpose. And once you decide it's your purpose, everything kind of changes. Do you know, do you remember kind of when that was or what that was like?
Yeah. Like I said, I was always a really competitive kid. So I think you could say I was passionate about competition and about the sort of the competitive nature of sports. So I was passionate about that. But after my mom and I moved away from home to, find a better coach, there was the World Championships for figure skating that year happened to be in Southern California. And so, I had to go. Um, and so when I saw, so that year, an American, Evan Lysacek, won the World Championships. And then the following year, he was at the Olympics, and I watched him win the Olympics. And sort of through those two competitions, watching Evan, like he was my childhood idol. So watching him win the World Championships and then go on to win the Olympics, that was what sort of turned that initial passion for the competitive nature of sports into a focused goal. I was like, I'm going to be on that stage one day. I want to do it. I didn't know how I was going to get there. All I
Yeah.
knew was that was something that was purpose to me. As much as a 9-year-old can know the meaning of purpose, that that was my purpose from that point on.
That's so great. I mean, the how you take that, and then you were alluding to it with that process, because you're one of many, right? I mean, it's not like you're the only I mean, we've all kind of been there. I mean, I've watched the Olympics. I want to do that, but that, that difference. So if you don't mind going a bit more into the process, you're speaking with families who have kids. We have a tremendous amount of tennis players, and I should give a quick shout out because I did see in the chat that we do have Alexis Kaplan here. Actually, Gabby is a figure skater, and she wanted to make sure she knows that her pair coaches are Alexa and Chris. That means I. So
Ah, yes, my good friends.
there there you go.
Oh,
So hey, Gabby. So we have a lot of, we've had a lot of tennis and a lot of this, but what we focus on is the different, we have a Ryan Bradley is the coach.
Ryan Bradley was my coach's student too. So
Wow. All right. So,
full circle there.
all the worlds are coming together, which is awesome. But we try to talk about at ICL is that growth mindset, that champion mindset, because you can set out a process, but to stick to it when obviously you're one of hundreds or thousands of kids who have the same, that look at that watch that Olympics or watch that and say, I want to do that. And so if you can delve into a little bit, how you started to separate from the pack and what that was like and what you did, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, in terms of sort of what allowed me to accelerate at a faster pace than others, number one was just straight up drive and grit and just ability to keep trying over and over again. My coaches when I was young actually, well, when I was young and when I was older, actually had to tell me to do less because I would get on the ice, I would be working in one thing for like 100 tries a session. And my coaches would get mad at me for doing too much. They'd have to limit me. Normally, you have coaches who are trying to push the skaters, but for me, it's like I didn't care how impossible it seemed. I just wanted to do it. I just wanted to do it. Um,
All that you were like the definition of a Nike commercial. You're like, I'm just do it. You're like,
just do it, yeah. And then the other thing was that I mentioned finding the right people and resources to surround myself with, but I credit my mom with helping with that. She is really smart and she was able to sort of just kind of gut instinct it out, like who's going to be right for me, who's not going to be right for me. And when you surround someone who has the drive, the desire, the talent and the ability, that's a little harder to tell if it's there or not for most people, I'd say. Um, but you can tell if the child has desire and drive, um, and passion. So if you see that in the kid, you need to give them the right environment, the right resources to succeed. And so all credit goes to my mom for recognizing that and for, putting a lot of effort into making sure I had what it took to, um, I had the right environment to, sort of sweep me along.
so
And
similar with all sports, I mean,
yeah,
and being individual. Sometimes if you're in a group sport, you don't have the choice of coaches the same way, but for tennis and golf and skating and the winter sports. But so your mom really saw that. You actually hear stories of Roger Federer actually having to people would shut the lights off at his club and he would physically start crying to say like he wanted to keep playing. So you had that mentality of just keep going. But I always say, but when you were doing these things, I mean, you could have broken bones. Like these are things that aren't like you were trying stuff that would make. I mean, my mother, I'm from New York. My mother couldn't have watched if I attempted to do any of that. So there was no fear, huh? I mean, you just went after it. That's
I mean, there was definitely fear. There's definitely fear, especially when trying something new for the first time. It's pretty typical. It's like you try a new trick for the first time, you try a new jump for the first time. It's terrifying. But at some point, you just have to sort of put your I don't know exactly how to describe the feeling, but it's like you almost have to just put all those earthly emotions behind, just pull in and go for it. And then, if you fall badly, well, you better learn quickly. So, for me, it was like I took lots of bad falls trying crazy stuff for the first time, but I learned quickly because this is one of I sort of have three tenets that I like to follow in my approach to sports, but the first one is to be scholarly, and that means that you want to really isolate the true causal effect of one thing on another, which is the scientific process. So as it relates to trying a new skill or a new jump, it's like, okay, so if that went poorly, what was the one thing that led to that? And how can I fix it? And I think that in sports, I think this varies from sport to sport, from system to system, but I noticed in skating, there's a lot of like pseudoscience in that coaches will see their student like fall or mess up and they'll just be like, oh, it's because of this. But it wasn't actually because of that, because like you try to fix what they told you to fix and then you still fall again. So obviously that's not what's actually contributing to the fall. So I went through many different coaching teams and iterations of, I want to work with this person, I want to work with this person, before I found someone who was able to reinforce that process as opposed to push against it. Because inside me, when I would mess up and I would fall, I'd be like, I don't think what you're saying is the cause of that, but I also can't argue with you because you're the coach. So like, it's kind of, in a difficult situation, right? But so I'd really encourage everyone to be scholarly and try your best to identify uh, what's going on, be able to think for yourself. Don't just, blindly follow instructions. Not all instruction is good instruction. Um,
Is that number two? So I wrote down, I feel like these are all such great gold nuggets. I'm sort of like, I mean, you're like hitting ICL 101. I mean, this is the integration. I'm like, I mean, do you want to teach I know you're a Brown, but like you want some teaching credit? This is all gold stuff. So number one, you had sort of be scholarly, isolate the true causal effect. And the second one is think for yourself.
well, that actually almost goes into the third one, but if you'd like, I can take sort of 5 minutes to explain my sort of framework.
Sure. Right.
Yeah, so you can almost think of it well, you can either think of it as three tenets, or you can think of it as like a pyramid, almost like Maslow's hierarchy. Being scholarly allows you to build a foundation of knowledge and experience in terms of just this is what works. A great foundation is critical for everything. So if you approach the skills you're trying to learn with a scientific mindset, you quickly establish sort of a library of principles that you should follow. I think a lot of movement is very similar across a lot of sports. Uh, for
Bio-
example, power comes from driving from the hips. This is true in figure skating. This is true in boxing. This is true in golf. It's true in
tennis
yeah,
for sure.
just about every sport. So building out that foundation of just scientifically uh derived principles. So that's be scholarly. And then the second tier above that is being confident. So this is with regards to the mental approach. If you look at all the top skaters, you might notice they seem to have wildly different techniques. But the more you look at it, they actually all have the similar foundation, the similar movement principles behind them. And then what goes on top of that is almost cosmetic in a sense. It helps them. It's just their little quirks that help them have faith in their technique or trust their technique. And in a sport where less than a second determines your fate, you really have no time for hesitation. So if you're not confident, it's already over. You have to go into the skill, the jump, the trick, whatever, knowing that you're going to do it, trusting the process, knowing that your technique is going to work. Otherwise, you hesitate, it's all over. So being confident is what allows you to apply the foundational principles, put it into practice, into competition effectively. And then above that, the very tip of the pyramid is be entrepreneurial. That's what really allows you to separate from the pack to turn the foundation and the application of that foundation into greatness. So being entrepreneurial refers to not being afraid to try new things, and not really taking public opinion of what's possible or what's not possible, not internalizing that as much, having your own roadmap. So I'll give you an example. Um, you know, the quad less was mentioned earlier. So when I was doing that, there were only two or three other people in the world who were also doing that. And so it really wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
It was one of those things where like most people didn't even think it was possible, so they just straight up didn't try it. But for me, I was like, I was thinking, okay, so my actually, okay, I won't get too technical because a lot of people here probably don't understand figure skating
No, this is
terminology,
no, this
but
is awesome. This is like honestly because you can actually relate it to everything you've said so far. Whether yeah, I'm a tennis player, so everything you're describing is so spot on to the mental side. Like, and for us, it's a serve, right? Like the pressure is the only thing you fully control in tennis, but the confidence to be able to hit a second serve, the point's lost if you miss it, and then to think for yourself. And we had a great champion mentor who's part of our organization, Dr. Jim Lair, who talks about Yoda being your own decision advisor, like your own inner voice. And that's a lot what you're talking about, that be entrepreneurial, think for yourself. But yeah, please continue. This is
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So so tennis is also a sport where, a split second determines everything. So you can't hesitate. You gotta trust the process. You gotta be confident in your technique. Um, but then, actually separating yourself from the pack, um, you have to be unafraid to sort of explore, find where the boundary is, and then not be afraid to step beyond it. So, I remember telling people in my rink, like, I'm going to try a quad lutz later. I didn't even tell my coach because my coach wouldn't let me try it. She was afraid I was going to get injured. So I waited until Friday afternoon when my coach was gone golfing, and then I tried it. And I remember the looks on people's faces when I told them I was going to do it. They either ignored me because they thought, oh, that's just like Vincent saying Vincent stuff, or they were like, what? You're crazy. But then I actually tried it, and I landed it on my third try, which is insane. Like people take years to learn triples. Um,
Mhm.
and I just did a quad on my third try on the first day. Um, but to me, that's more about the mental approach than the physical and any, physical attributes. People will look at that and say like, oh, you're just different. You're just like so talented, or you can just do things or whatever. I think we all know people like that who have just been amazing from day one. But from my perspective, from my perspective, if I didn't believe that I could do it, there's no way it would have happened. Um, it it's hard to find examples to sort of concretely illustrate this because it's such a subjective thing. It's such a, personal feeling based thing. But when you don't have confidence, when you don't have belief in your ability to excel beyond the norm, it's really hard to do just that, to excel beyond the norm. And an example I have of this is, and this might bleed into another question about, adversity or a difficult time that through.
Perseverance is the next P.
Yeah. So, at the 2022 Olympics, after winning gold in the team event, I actually tested positive for COVID the night before the much more important individual event. So I'd been training for that my entire life, and in an instant, it was just all, ripped away. And that was devastating. Like my dream just came crashing down before my eyes. And I was whisked away into isolation, spent the rest of my games, in a dark, musty hotel room watching other people live my dream. And
God.
yeah, and so and then the Olympics was the penultimate competition of my career. So the World Championships came up after that in a few weeks. And it was like, how do you pull yourself back from that to then go and compete at Worlds, which, aside from the Olympics, is the biggest and most important competition in all of figure skating. And it was going to be the final competition of my career. It's like, how am I going to humanly, bring myself back from that? So, after the Olympics, I got home and I was just in a really dark place. Like most days I couldn't even, get up and go to the rink. Um, the days that I managed to, no matter how hard I physically tried, because my mind was not there, because I had nothing left in the mental gas tank. My body wasn't able to do anything. I remember very clearly on a session trying as physically hard as I could to do a quad lutz, which,
Mhm.
which at that point should have been, easy, consistent for me. And I just could not do it. Even triples felt like really difficult. I'm pretty sure I fell on triple for the first time in like years. Um, so to me, that really illustrates the point that if your mind is not there, no matter how you try, no matter how hard you try physically, you can't do it. But then the turning point came a few days before I was supposed to fly out to Worlds. At that point, I hadn't trained for 5 weeks. I wasn't able to train for 5 weeks, and then I had a few days left until the final competition of my career, which was the World Championships. Like that's just an impossible situation, right? So at that point, the decision the decision was, should I withdraw? Am I even going to compete? Um, and I think for the first time in my life, my mom came and told me that it was okay to withdraw. It was okay to give up. Because so my mom is an extremely tough mom. She's never, those words have literally never came out of her mouth. And in that moment, hearing that from her really jolted me into like a different dimension. I was like, wait, I can give up? No, I can't. I'm not allowed to give up. And so her saying I was allowed to give up almost like made me revert into like don't give up mode. And and like I started feeling this like something like almost like primal instinct. Like when you're cornered, it's fight or flight. And my instinct has always been to fight. And so my instincts kicked in and I was like, I'm getting on this plane. I'm doing it. And the next few days, I went into training again, and I'm gonna be honest, it was no easier to get my body going, but my mind the gears had begun to spin. I got on the plane to France, 5.5 weeks of no training, and then you have a few days of practice ice, 2 days of practice ice before you compete. And and the first day was pretty rough. On the second day, something really magical happened. Um, I started feeling weightless. I had some of the best practices of my career. Um, I was just hitting everything. I was actually enjoying myself again. I felt like, the wind blowing through my hair and my feet just like zooming across the ice surface. And I was like, whoa, this is fun. I didn't know skating felt like this. This is really fun. And you know what? You know why? The reason that was is because my hardest battle at that point was already won. The hardest battle wasn't performing at Worlds. It wasn't doing my program at Worlds. It wasn't doing a quad lutz or whatever at Worlds. The hardest part was deciding to go. The hardest part was not giving up. And once I had committed there, I'd already won. And so from that point on, everything just started to click into place. And and so that's how, with almost 6 weeks of no training, and after something I'd been working towards for 16 years, my childhood dream got, taken away from me. That's how I recovered from that and went on to finish my career with a world championships medal. And so that sort of ending, like I didn't think it was possible. I was like, this is like a Hollywood movie or something. Like
Totally.
you don't
Total
just
movie.
get to you don't just get to, come back from something like that. Like it just doesn't happen that way. But so that's the magic of the mindset. When even when the body isn't there, even when the training isn't there, your mind will take you. the long way. Your mental approach to obstacles, to adversity, will take you much further, way further than any amount of physical training ever can.
Vincent, it's amazing you talk about the Hollywood story, because as you sat and talked, and I mean, I knew the story because you and I have connected before, but it's funny because you're watching the Hallmark movie and it's you hit on the last one, perspective. Your perspective changed, your mental mindset. You were in a completely different place. You were down in the dumps, like you talked about. You could not physically compete because of where you were at mentally, and your perspective changed. And normally the Hallmark ending is, although my perspective changed, I tried my hardest and I didn't win the champion. You did. You actually won the championship on top of having the perspective that changed, which is just amazing. You started to hit on and, talk about confidence and mental preparation. A lot of the questions that are coming in through the chat are around those elements. I want to take 30 seconds and let everyone on the call know. First and foremost, guys, we understand that Vincent's pretty amazing. He's a pretty great speaker. The good thing is that he is a champion mentor with us. He will be back. This won't be our only time with Vincent. Although he's a very busy individual, Vincent's going to be around. We're going to have some webinars with him, some time with Vincent. He's willing to do that with us, but we're going to try and get through as many of the questions, because again, I see there's probably about 40 to 50 questions, some of which are similar within the chat, and some of them are just shout outs to you, Vincent, and just saying, kudos for you being who you are. So if you're okay with it, we're gonna rifle through a few other questions. And again, your perspective has been just amazing thus far. You hit earlier on academics, and right now you're attending Brown. You're going through a program at Brown, and you've in essence taken the approach of academics and education are very important to you. Talk a little bit about that to our families, to the students, and to the parents. And then after we hit on that, I'm going to dig into the chat, into the Q&A a little bit, and talk about some of the questions that are coming through there. But talk about why academics are something you prioritize and continue to prioritize.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, figure skating is a sport where your body expires early, kind of like gymnastics. It's kind of rare to see longevity in the sport, especially as the meta has shifted. So figure skating has always been a balance of athleticism and artistry, but in the last decade, the meta has really shifted to emphasize the athletic part, where more and more difficult jumps, quads are becoming common. You can't just have one quad that's 4 rotations in the air. You need multiple quads to even have a chance at making the final group. And so doing all those, extremely difficult high risk elements takes a toll on your body. It's just pounding on your joints and on your tendons and ligaments day after day, hundreds of attempts a day. And it really wears down the body. So in a sport where longevity is not the norm, it's critical to have a backup plan. And also in a sport where there's no, huge corporate sponsors, there's no major source of funding. I would say US Figure Skating as an organization is pretty broke, and it's pretty hard for skaters to get sponsorships. The ones who do are, maybe the once in a generation athletes, who win everything and are just untouchable. Maybe they get like a Coca-Cola sponsorship or something, but for the rest of us, it's just, you don't really have the option to, live on skating for the rest of your life. So my parents recognized that early on, and so they always pushed me hard academically. Just, telling me, skating isn't forever. You're not going to skate forever. What are you going to do after that? And so, I made a lot of sacrifices despite moving away from home for skating and doing all these things for skating. At the same time, I still put in a lot of effort to make sure that I was meeting the college requirements, the application requirements, and that I was still getting a proper education, in which, it saddens me to say, but a lot of skaters, and I don't know about every sport, but I'm sure this is true for some other sports, that a lot of young athletes end up sacrificing school to push themselves harder and spend more time training for their sport. And so I'm really lucky that my school program had flexible timing. My online school program had flexible timing that allowed me to sort of learn on my own terms, on my own time, and that they understood what I was trying to do with skating, and they were there to support that, which is invaluable. Something that, ICL gives its something ICL gives its students. I never I tell everyone, never take that for granted. Having the ecosystem that works with you instead of against you. So like going to regular school, for example, would be something in your ecosystem that works against you, because just of the time commitment, the physical travel commitment. It's just really hard to overcome. But having sort of a flexible learning model was super important. And then the other thing was just time management. My day was very structured. I would wake up early, train until, the afternoon, or the evening, and then the rest of the day would just be schoolwork, schoolwork, schoolwork. And that's just like it's only time management, but just having your priorities straight, and being motivated by the outcome that you want. Because I say a lot of people have an outcome that they want, but they're not necessarily motivated when it's time to put it into practice. They'd rather sit there and twiddle their thumbs than take action. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't fall victim to that too sometimes. But at the end of the day, I knew that my dream was to make the Olympic team. I also knew that skating wasn't going to last forever. And my parents really helped uh, drive that message deep through both the language that they imparted to me and the action and process that they instilled around me. So, I'm really lucky to have parents that supported that and recognized the importance of academics. But at the end of the day, someone can tell you to do something, but you have to want to do it. Um, and so for me, it was like I just recognized that, yeah, that's objectively the right thing to do, so I did it.
I want to harp on, because what you're hitting at, and sort of what ICL represents, is that culmination, that crossover between, what schools don't usually talk about. It seems like they're different, right? Education and your skating, but the things that you said and your sort of pyramid of be scholarly, be confident, be entrepreneurial, that also is the same, with when you're studying, right? Like having the purpose and that mindset. So do you find, now that you're actually at Brown, you're sort of fully committed to studying, but your discipline, and we talk at ICL a lot, instead of the word time management, we talk about energy management, like energy oscillation and how to manage that. Do you find the advantage of what you've been through as an athlete to help you in your education? And do you actually think that because you did study and you seem incredibly cerebral, even your approach, you came at skating from an educational mindset, like really going deep, not just listening to your coaches? A lot of athletes, it doesn't, but you were actually in yourself, being a student, and bringing in science and math and physics, and understanding that why things make sense. Um, do you now have a little bit of perspective, being separated, being in that educational world, and seeing the intersection of the sports, and maybe they're not so distinctly separate?
Yeah, there's a lot of principles and just lessons and approaches I've learned from being an athlete that I find are, prevalent everywhere in the real world. And I will say it is a challenge. It is a challenge sort of transitioning from a physical process to an intellectual process, going from, my only job every day just being to maximize my physical performance on the ice to, having to stare at pieces of paper and like solve problems and stuff. It's a bit of a transition, but I think a lot of the approaches still apply. When I'm tackling something I don't know how to do, often the most important thing is just to start, and then the pieces will fall into place. And also when, uh, when approaching like a difficult exam or something, it almost feels like a competition where I know that like, okay, this time I can't afford mistakes, but at the same time, it's like, well, before competition, one of the mental strategies I would always use is to, uh, or not before competition, but in competition, I would always visualize myself in my home rink as I was skating out in the arena to take my starting pose. And that instantly instilled a sense of calm in me, just sort of seeing the same color walls and the same lighting as my home rink and just, imagining all the other skaters that I normally train with on the ice. Because I've done that thousands of times. And that's something that I'm just inherently much more comfortable with. And so, now when I go into an exam that I'm really nervous about, I try to do the same thing. I just try to, I look at the paper in front of me, I ignore my surroundings. I just imagine I'm, in the basement of my dorm working with my friends on a practice problem set or something. And then the pieces start to fall into place. And so that's sort of like, okay, you just got to get started and then trust the process. Things will come. So
Awesome.
yeah.
That's so good. And I know you've hit on so many of the questions here. It's funny, as Dayton said, I mean, a lot of our kids, it is how do you gain the confidence? How do you overcome the adversity? So much is mindset. I don't know if their parents here is from our staff. When he was saying that, I was thinking Hoosiers. I'm like picturing Gene Hackman with like the tape, telling the team that they're in their home court. But it is so important. You're hitting on that, just the mind, how, yes, you were in a physical activity, but that mindset and the mental side actually was, even from a young age, so important to you. But I'll pass
Yes.
it back to Dayton if you want to do a speed dating round or go through some of the questions.
Actually, if you don't mind, I have just one more thing to say on
Sure.
that, which is that at the top level in the sport, everyone is physically capable of doing, on par, doing the same thing basically. So on competition day, it just comes down to who's the better competitor. You don't like I was my coach started telling me this when so there's another American figure skater, Nathan Chen, who's widely regarded as one of the greatest of all time. And a lot of people were saying, the only thing, looking back, the only thing holding Vincent Zhou back was that he had to compete with Nathan Chen at the same time. Nathan Chen didn't lose a single competition for like 4 or 5 years. Um, and and going into the 2022 Olympic season, he was the one to beat. And nobody could do it. Even the other goats couldn't do it. And my coach started telling me, like, look, screw the Vincent Joe's number 2 thing. If you want to have a chance to even, if you don't have the smallest chance of beating him, you've got to start thinking of yourself as actually having the chance to. You're not going into this competition to get number 2. You're going into this competition to get number 1. So that was the first step in sort of freeing up my mind to think in that way. Because I mean, I don't want to put words in my competitors' mouths, but let's be honest, we were all thinking the same thing. Whenever you go in to compete with Nathan Chen, you're competing for the number 2 and number 3 spots. You're not competing for the number 1 spot. But I started competing for the number 1 spot. And so during that season at a Skate America competition, I did it. And that was because I was the better competitor that day. He was, he may have, better technique than me. He may be a better skater than me. There's probably 1,000 things that he's better than me at.
That
But
day.
on that day, I had the stronger mind, and that made the difference.
Yep.
So
That's it.
that's so awesome and so similar to tennis too. I mean, you look at the goats. If you walked around the U.S. Open in the qualifying weeks without any names, you would think that everyone can hit a ball like the four. I mean, it actually looks better like than the top 10 players. You just are like, wow, they're just smashing it. But when it comes down to it, we know who's there. Awesome.
Vincent, thanks again. I mean, we've got about 5 minutes left. We want to be cognizant of your schedule. We know that you took time out of your day to do this, and again, just want to say thank you first and foremost. One of the things I'll mention to everybody on the call, if you have questions that have come in that haven't been, I mean, again, Vincent's answered a lot of the questions by some of the answers he's provided. If the questions haven't been answered, I'm going to connect with Vincent on the side. We've got a full transcript of the questions that come in. I will make sure we get answers to those. I want to spend the last couple of minutes, Vincent, really focused on our students, if you don't mind. And this is a question that's come in different ways from a lot of the kids within the chat and within the Q&A. And that is, what advice would you give our young students here at ICL Academy who are aspiring to reach the highest level? Yours is in figure skating. You talk about world championships, you talk about the Olympics, some may be tennis, some may be equestrian, some may also be figure skating. We've got performing artists that hope to become professional actors and actresses. For those out there that are trying to aspire to reach the top level, what advice would you give them?
I would really emphasize the entrepreneurial part of the pyramid. I think everyone at ICL Academy already has great resources to learn, a great ecosystem to push them along. But to become great, to become the best of the best, you have to have that spark. I see it in every great figure skater, anyone who's doing crazy new things and setting world records. It's hard to explain, but I just see it in them. They're not afraid to try these things. They just try things for fun. And, parents and coaches sometimes get mad at them for just messing around or not working on what's important. But in reality, like to us, we're pushing the boundaries. And there were a lot of things that I tried for fun that, I wasn't technically supposed to be trying, that ended up separating myself from the pack. The quad lutz was one of those things. And then after I landed the quad lutz, then I decided to mess around and try doing a quad lutz with both arms above my head, which is a very difficult variation of a jump. And then I became the first person in the world to do that too. So there are a lot of things that were not the precedent at the time, and I didn't care. I did it because or I tried it because I was almost put off by people's attitudes towards those things. I was like, why are you so like, why are you so averse to these things? Why are you so like, sheeple mindset? Like, don't, if you don't think you can do it, fine, but don't stop me from trying. And so I was just, my approach was just like, I wasn't afraid to, I didn't shy away from the concept uh of boundary pushing things. And that's why I would really encourage everyone else to be like that. Sort of educate yourself on what people think is the precedent or the norm. Take that and then put it a couple steps behind and put yourself a couple steps in front of that. Because if most people think one way, then what's really possible is probably a few steps ahead of that. That's just how it is. In the business world, you got technology startups doing things that most people don't realize is possible now. It's a similar thing. The emerging technology CEOs and leaders, they're the ones who are taking their own ideas and saying, screw what you think is possible. I'm going to take this idea and run with it. And in a few years, you'll see. And so, that's how Google came to be. That's how Apple and Microsoft and Intel, NVIDIA, all these amazing technology companies came to be. My Bay Area, my Silicon Valley background is showing now. But it's the same thing, and it's the same thing in sports. If there's some crazy new thing that that people don't seem to think is possible, chances are it's possible. They just don't realize it yet. But you can realize it. You can be the one to, then in a few years, everyone will be a follower. Everyone will be trying it, but they'll be followers. But then you will be the leader, the innovator. So everyone here, just encourage you to be an innovator and to like I said, find the boundary and then not be afraid to step beyond it.
That's amazing. I'm going to break my normal rule. I'm going to take, you have 2 more minutes with us? Do you have 2 minutes?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, 2 more minutes. So you touched a ton on visualization. You hit on some manifestation, and I feel like to reach the top levels like you have, it takes those techniques. And you even just talked about it a moment ago. You're talking about thinking 3, steps ahead. I mean, you've got to visualize yourself being in that situation to be able to accomplish and tackle those feats, which is just amazing. So I appreciate you saying that. kind of shifting gears really quick. We've got to ask a figure skating question because it's come up a few times in the chat. Everyone wants to know, did you complete a quad loop? Did you try a quad loop? I have to ask that question.
Oh, that's interesting. I did try it. I tried it like maybe 3 times, but at that point, the quad loop wasn't very important anymore to my arsenal. I already had enough quads. What a problem to have, I know. I already had enough other types of quads to sort of fill up the element slots in my program, to the point where the return of learning a quad loop was not worth the cost that I would expend trying to learn it. So yes, I did try it. No, I never did it. But it wasn't really necessary, I would say. So, and that's sort of part of it. It's like being smart. Like, it's like, sure, sometimes you want to encourage, like, I want to encourage you to try new things and different things. But in terms of strategy, in terms of process, you also have to recognize the things that will bring you the most return. So, for example, doing a quad lutz was something that had a huge marginal return. Um, but then after that, I could do a quad lutz, a quad flip, a quad sow, a quad toe. At that point, learning a quad loop brought me very little marginal return. So then it wasn't really that important to my competitive strategy to learn that. It was much more, it would net me much more points to focus on other things.
Do you not feel scared doing this? I'm like picturing you do that. My quads hurt from thinking about it. First of all, like I feel sore right now. But like, does fear enter your mind in this? Like, this is some crazy stuff. The ice
Yeah.
hurts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that could go wrong. There's a lot that could go wrong, um, but if you really recognize the common movement principles and technique principles uniting each different type of jump, then you have a much better chance of success at trying new things by, applying what you've already learned on other things to that new thing. So
Our winter sports champions are a different level. I'm thinking about years we had Sean White years ago, Bodie Miller, and Sean was so similar. He'd land something and be like, "What's next right now? Like what's going on?"
exactly, yeah.
And Bodie would like bear like space-time continuum and bend reality on his jumps. And I'm just like, other sports don't do that as much. So, but there's something pretty amazing about you guys. So it's amazing, absolutely incredible.
Vincent, final two questions and you're off the hot seat. First one is to parents. You talked a lot about your mom, talked a lot about the support. To our parents that are on the call, and again, I have kids myself, Kirk has kids, pretty much everyone on this call has kids, and we're all going to parent differently. But if you could give advice to the parents, being someone that is 23 years old, that started at age 5, that went through the ups and downs, from the support system standpoint as a parent, what would you tell the parents that are on the call today, and how can they support their young, aspiring athletes or performing artists as they work towards their passion?
Um, I would say there's two things I would say. For number one is that especially as the child gets older and moves through their late teens and early adulthood, it's important to start weighting their input more heavily, because so the model early on is like the parents and the coach are leading the kid, but as the kid gets older and matures, the approach shifts to a triangle of the parent, the coach, and the athlete working together, all with equally weighted input. And I think it depends on the sport. Some sports are much more coach athlete and less parent. But even between just a coach athlete relationship, the athlete and the coach should start communicating more as equals the more mature the athlete gets, because the athlete is the one feeling things. The athlete is the one doing the things. So if you're not taking input from them, whose input are you taking, And so this is something that I saw a lot in skating. Coaches and parents would repeatedly fail to take in the athlete's input and then wonder why their approaches weren't working. And then the other thing is that listen to the athlete's body. If the athlete seems to be having an abnormally tough time, and they're talking about some pain or something, chances are they're not they're not using it as an excuse. Now the interplay between experiencing pain while training and sort of the mental approach of just giving up versus not giving up, that's a lot more nuanced. And it's true that if you're training on an injured body part or something's hurting, it definitely affects your mindset, makes you less sort of less confident and eager to try things. But regardless, you got to listen to the athlete's body. Otherwise, you'll pay the price in a major way later on. I learned this very young. I had surgery on my knee when I was 12 for a torn meniscus, a 2 centimeter tear, because I've been skating on it for 3 years and on the torn meniscus for 3 years. And it got so big that they couldn't even repair it, so they just took my meniscus out. And I paid the price in losing 2 seasons in which I no longer was the leading young upstart. Other people had overtaken me in that time. And then for the rest of my career, it felt like I was playing catch up. So listen to your body.
Awesome. Last question, Vincent. I promise we'll let you go. And this is one of the questions that came in from one of our students.
But we need you back. We need you back because they're
Absolutely.
most questions I've ever seen. We literally have like hundreds. This is wild. Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
Yes, we do. Last question. It came in a couple of different ways, but it was this, and that is, do you think you'd be the person you are today without having to persevere and go through what you did at the Olympics? Talk about how that molded you. Did that shape you, or were you already that person? Talk a little bit about that.
That's such a great question. I mean, it's always a game of what ifs and wishful thinking to go back and be like, oh, I wish that hadn't happened at the Olympics. What if I had competed individual? What if I had won 2 medals from that Olympics instead of just one? Again, I know what a problem to have. But at the end of the day, I always say this: if I had to go back and live my life again 100 times, I'd probably make the same choices, maybe 99 or 100 of those times. Of course, assuming that I didn't get to retain the knowledge I have now. My mom and I really did our best to work with the information that we had and make the best strategic decision for my career moving forward, putting aside sort of, irrational factors and fear of sacrificing something else. We really put all that aside and just did what it took. And so, if I had to go back through 100 times, I'd probably do the same thing again 100 times. I don't regret any difficulty I've been through. I don't regret any unfortunate event that's happened, except for one, which is that I didn't listen to my body sooner, which led to me having surgery at 12. That's the one thing.
Wow.
But
Surgery.
but aside from that, my adversity, the struggles I've gone through, the adversity I faced, and how I respond to those situations is what defines me, and shapes my character today. So my gold medals and my successes, I don't want to let those define my character. If your entire personality is just I win, then you lose at life. So like I said, my mental approach, my grit, my drive, that's what shapes me as a person. And I really hope all the kids here can embrace and embody the same thing. So
Let me share 2 comments for you, and then you're off the hot seat for good. And the first comment is, next time we see you, the kids expect you to be wearing the gold medal. They want to.
then that would be making my victories my personality. I don't want to do.
I know that, and that's why I just propped that up there. As you talked about, it's not about I win, and so I saw so many pieces come in saying, "Oh, we want to see the gold." So at some point, the students would love to see the gold. But I want to share a comment that just came in, and then we're done. And that is, This was from one of our students, and I'm just going to read it. She says, I just have to say, everything you've said so far has been so real and honestly correlates to my life so much that I just have to say, I hope to get as mentally strong as you and just keep going with all the challenges you face ahead. So it just shows you, back to the point Kirk just made a moment ago. We've had so much interaction over the past hour and 10 minutes with you. Maybe it's been an hour, but regardless, there's hundreds of questions in the chat. I'll connect with you on the side. And I just want to say, from all of us at ICL, that's our students, our staff, our families, thank you so much for being with us. This was invaluable. I want to give you the final 30 seconds to share anything you'd like, and then I promise you can take off after that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dayton, Kirk, everyone, and all the students and parents for having me and for the positive response. I mean, I didn't expect such a positive response. I'm just talking about what I did and what I know. So, but I just want to say that this probably won't be our only touch point. Like I said, I hope to continue to be a resource to everyone. Happy to, talk with people again and sort of share my experience and my perspective. But I also know there's a lot of skaters in the chat, it sounds like. So best of luck to everyone in their journeys. Thank you so much again for having me, and don't be afraid to push beyond the boundary.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Vincent.
Good luck back to school. Yeah, exactly. You're back. You literally are back to school. So we're all here cheering for you, and we hope we can be a resource for you as well. So
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate y'all.